Travis with TCustomz Productionz, TCustomz.com. Today we're back with part 5 of the piano tips for Beatmaker series. Today we're going to cover broken chords and simple arpeggios. This kind of transitions smoothly from what we talked about in the past videos of the 1-4-5 chord progression, and we also went into your chord inversions. We can also play these chords in a broken fashion or as an arpeggio. So I thought today, since we've already talked about chords and chord inversions, this would be a good topic to keep the series going. I know some of you have contacted me directly asking for specific questions or topics that you would like covered in this series, so I'm definitely taking all that stuff into account. Let's jump over to the keys and we'll get into broken chords and arpeggios. Alright, so by now we should be able to play some basic inversions. Going back to the key of C in our C major triad, we should now be able to do, our very simple inversions in F, G, do is take some of these chords and not just play them with all the notes at the same time, but you may have seen me even in some of the past videos kind of breaking these chords up, and it just kind of it's something I do naturally now that I've been playing for a while. I like that broken sound. Basically all I'm doing is playing the notes individually, so you can play the broken chord like this, or if I do both triads, speed it up. And so the quicker you go, you get that kind of effect. And you can also apply that to your inverted chords. We go back to the 1-4-5. You can also do broken chords in a different way. I'm playing it basically from the bottom to the top. You could do broken chords playing them actually from the top down. And that's a little different. It's a little more complicated for me to get my left synced up to play it last because I'm so used to coming down first with my bass. But nonetheless, the point is that you can do a lot of different things. Now, kind of piggybacking on the broken chord, we introduced the arpeggio. And an arpeggio is also a broken chord, but you can do a lot of interesting things. You can span across multiple octaves. Many times, depending on what type of tracks that you're working on, you may incorporate an arpeggiator. You may have some arpeggiators in some of your virtual instruments. You may have an arpeggiator function on, say, one of your keyboards. I know my MPK49 has an arpeggiator, and you can turn basically a note or a chord into an arpeggio. And essentially what it's doing is it's taking a chord or a note and it's spanning it and playing different notes in that chord in different patterns and across multiple octaves depending on how it's programmed. Typically with an arpeggiator you can set up how many octaves you want to just go 1 octave, 2 octaves, 5 octaves. Basically we'll be playing notes all across the keyboard, or if you want something that's more confined you can set that up, and you can also program whatever kind of rhythmic pattern that you want to play. So with the arpeggio we're just doing kind of a manual version of that, but in its simple form we go back to the C major chord. This is the full chord. And what you can do is you can actually take this to 2 octaves. The way that you do the C major arpeggio with 2 octaves, like the C, E, G chord with 1, 2, 3. Typically we do a 1, 3, 5 with our fingering, because now we're basically playing the full chord. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, and off of this G we're going to pivot cross under with our thumb and almost kind of jump over here to this C note and play that full chord like that. So it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 5. And then you can take it back down. As you practice, one thing I want to point out with this, as you start getting into more technical and exercises and start to play a little bit more and get more advanced into your piano playing, we've talked a lot about theory, but the technique is also a big important factor in this, and basically the way that you're playing. Starting out, if you've never played keys before, you might have a tendency to kind of slouch your hands and have them flat. You might have a tendency to play a lot of times with your wrist rather than your fingers, because your fingers might be a little bit weak starting out. There's all these things to keep in mind. If you're trying to play flat, you're kind of limiting yourself on what you're able to do in dexterity with your fingers. As I was taking a formal lesson, I constantly had my teacher reminding me, keep your hands elevated. I've kind of been out of the loop and haven't been playing formally for a while, so sometimes I still lose it, but I'm having difficulty in certain areas playing an arpeggio or a run or something. It kind of reminds me, okay, check out my technique, make sure my hands are in the proper positions. Another thing to keep in mind is that your fingers are faster than your wrist. A lot of times if you're not strong in your fingers, You'll try to play things with your wrist, and especially as you're navigating up and down the keys, that's when it becomes a lot more critical that you actually get in and start doing some exercises to really strengthen your fingers. And I've had some requests come in about exercises and things like that, so I'll definitely do what I can in future videos to put together maybe some specific exercises that you might be able to do to strengthen your fingers and improve the dexterity. But here's another exercise or variation you might try with the arpeggio or broken chord. And so if we go back to the C major triad with our left hand, and we also play the same chord an octave higher with our right hand. It's also going to depend on the size of your keyboard. If you don't have a full piano like this, you may be limited to only a few octaves. You're just going to play like this, and you cross over with your left and play the octave above. You can go back down if you like. And some of this stuff might feel kind of unnatural at first. Make sure to keep things slow at first. If you are having problems in certain areas, you can always work up to speed. And as you get into this more, that's why I really do recommend a formal lesson if you can take one. If nothing else, to have somebody at least monitoring the way that you're playing, and they can correct maybe bad habits that you might pick up early on. It's a lot easier to fix those early than to practice and practice and practice the wrong way and then try to correct those later. Now, when you're making your beats, it might not be as crucial that your technique is perfect, but depending on how complex and how deep you want to get into this, your technique is definitely going to have something to do with it. So if you do have the opportunity to have somebody coach you or take a formal lesson, I would definitely recommend that. Going back to this exercise. Another thing you can do, especially if you have a limited amount of keys, is overlap. So if I do this, now I can replay the same chord with my left hand. So as I come up on this G, I'm going to fall back down on this C. I'm going to replay that. And then as you get good and you speed up, Alright, so in the simplest form, that is more or less an arpeggio or a broken chord. The key to any of this theory, techniques, is practice. It takes time. All this stuff does not come naturally. It's something that you kind of have to condition your hands to do. And that's also going to depend on to what extent or to what level that you really want to play keys. If you want to do something more formal and you really want to get deep into this and come up with some complex arrangements and pieces, it becomes a lot more critical for technique to make sure that you really get some of these things corrected early on so you're not trying to fix bad habits later. So I hope this was helpful. If you made it this far and you enjoyed the video, would appreciate a thumbs up, subscribe if you're new to the channel. I look forward to hearing from you in the comments. If you do decide you need some one-on-one coaching to kind of help guide you along with some of these techniques or anything piano playing or beat making related, I do have a few openings for coaching sessions, so make sure to check that out in the description. Feel free to hit me up with any questions, connect with me on social media. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Peace.